At the peak of my addiction,
I was drinking 2.5 bottles of liquor every single day, which, fuck, that equates to like 900 bottles of whiskey and vodka every single year.
it was so bad at one time that I would drink immediately when I woke up because the withdrawals would be way too much to even handle. My whole body would start shaking, I would sweat, and it was just super intense. And at that time, I was such a fucking shit show that I was doing copious amounts of cocaine to just stay even the least bit functional. For me, I have an extremely addictive personality. Addiction just runs through my blood. I live for those little dopamine hits all day long. And unfortunately, I've lost close to a dozen friends to alcohol and drug addiction now. But I've been really lucky. I made the choice to fight this thing. In fact, I'm about to celebrate 12 years of sobriety coming right around the corner. And in this video, I'm going to give you my honest, raw, shame-free journey to sobriety. And just to be clear, I'm not trying to force you to get sober or put my opinion on you. That shit does not work. My parents tried to help me quit too, and I did not listen for years and years and years. Sorry, Mom and Dad. In fact, I didn't listen to anyone at all, even people who told me I was going to die in a year if I didn't stop. But I want to share my journey with you so you know what is possible when you finally decide that it's time for you to take the step into sobriety and save your life ultimately. A lot of addicts think that sobriety is so boring, but I want to show you that there's so much good shit on the other side. I had my first drink at 12. I think my friend stole a bottle of Boone's Farm from his mom, and it was love at first sip. I've always had anxiety, and it felt like alcohol just turned the volume down in my brain a little bit, so that had me hooked pretty instantly. And my group of friends, when we were 13, partied harder than college kids. When our normal connection couldn't get us booze, we would do this thing called garage shopping, and we would go around into people's garage in the middle of the night and go in their beer fridge and steal all the beer out of it. Fuck, today we would have got shot. Around 13 too was when I discovered drugs. First started with crushing up friends' ADHD medications and snorting them just to see what would happen. By 14 or 15 was ecstasy, cocaine, Molly, and those drugs helped me party longer and harder, and we were all doing them. By the time I graduated high school, I wasn't just a kid who partied with his friends on the weekends. I was a full-blown alcoholic. I ended up getting into Western Michigan University. I went there for business in general, and I was drinking every single fucking day. I was not going to class very often, and I started to not be able to really function or do anything socially without being fucked up. And I decided it was just not a good place for me to be and wasting all my parents' cash. So I decided to drop out after the first semester. So shortly after dropping out of college, my parents said, hey, we're gonna move to Colorado, to the Boulder area. Do you wanna come with us? And I said, hell yeah. I was really stoked. I needed some change at the time, and I think they thought it would be a new environment for me to hopefully turn my life around a little bit, but fuck, were they wrong. I pretty much immediately moved right up to the Vail area, and suddenly I lived in this huge house with 6 or 7 other dudes, and we were all major fucking partiers. And it was around this time when shit started to really get real. The partying level went from like here to here, like Motley Crue style partying, and then I made a lot of new friends. And before we knew it, there was probably 30 or so of us that were a pretty tight group, and we all partied almost every single day. And I still loved uppers, got into MDMA, much larger amounts of pure MDMA, pure cocaine, a lot more psychedelic use, ketamine, nitrous oxide, huffed shitloads of balloons in those days. And this was while drinking, 30 shots, 40 shots a day. So very quickly, my tolerance had me drinking probably around like a half gallon of liquor every day for 4 years, I would say, 4 years straight. And it got dark quick in the sense that it was fun as fuck, but I couldn't function without that shit. So when I'd pass out, I'd wake up, I'd probably have a bottle next to the bed, start drinking immediately, basically as soon as I opened my eyes. And that was whenever I could afford it or whenever anyone else had any booze around, we were drinking it right away, first thing. And towards the end there, I was homeless for a while and I was crashing on people's couches. I was hitchhiking around. I ended up living at a buddy's house up in an even more remote area, probably 10 miles outside of Vail. There was times when I don't remember 3 or 4 days at a time, just pure blackout. But that was never enough. It took 2 hospital visits in 12 hours, really, to really start to finally crack something in my brain, literally. One wintry powder day at Vail, we were snowboarding, super hammered drunk, probably on a number of different drugs too. And I crashed, smacked my head, and woke up in the hospital. I had no idea how I got there, but my mom was there to see me in the hospital. They ended up discharging me, told me I had a concussion and that I needed to go home and rest, and someone needed to keep an eye on me. I can't remember exactly how it all unfolded, but I told my mom that I was fine and she needs to basically go back to the mountains because obviously I wanted to drink, and if my mom was there, I wasn't going to be able to do that with a severe head injury. And I started drinking pretty much right away after that and ended up going to Aspen for a concert. I remember riding there a little bit with some friends and then waking up in the ambulance on the way to the hospital for a second hospital visit in one day. No idea what happened. Apparently I took too much ketamine or something. And one of my best friends, who had been my friend since I was like 10, also was with me that day. And he also has alcohol and drug problems. And even he was like, dude, what the fuck are you doing, man? You're going to die. And that started to hit me a little bit because when other addicts or alcoholics are telling you that shit's real, you start to listen a little bit. Not that I really cared at the time. All I could think about was drinking. But I think subconsciously I started to store all of the people that were telling me these things over the years, including my parents. And once I recovered and got out of the hospital the next morning, I started to really think about what the fuck I was doing with my life. But before I talk about how exactly I quit, I want to share something with you. It's now been 12 years since I stopped drinking, 10 years with who's now my wife. I have 2 young, beautiful kids at home. I'm able to financially provide for my family as the single earner, so my wife can be at home with our kids and building that really important parenting relationship. And that feeling is honestly really hard for me to put into words, knowing where I was at a little over 12 years ago. I went from homeless, alcoholic, drug addict, partying nonstop, that's all I lived for, to an entrepreneur, someone who has started 3 businesses, got married, had 2 kids, and a bunch of other really cool shit that's happened to me as a result of changing my life. So now that I gave you that little fast forward of my life now, let's talk about what happened at age 22 for me when I finally decided to get sober. I quickly realized that there was no way in hell I could get sober in Vail. So I needed to completely isolate myself from the people I was hanging out with, which is why I decided to move to Boulder. Luckily, my folks had a room for me and they welcomed me with open arms. I think they're very relieved to hear that I was trying to call it quits with the booze. And I actually started going to AA. I think I got 60 days under my belt by sitting through the meetings and being uncomfortable. AA was a little intimidating at first, but I showed up. I went, I kept going, and during the nights when I would come home from AA and drink that pint, once I stopped doing that, something really profound and scary happened. I started convulsing and like having seizures and hallucinating like insane things. And I was basically like screaming in my parents' house that someone was breaking in, and it was like my buddy Doug that I thought was breaking into our house. And I was just fucking losing it. So I had to actually go to the hospital for withdrawals. And they laid me down and pumped me with Ativan, which is like an anti-anxiety medication. And that helped with the convulsions that I was having. I was like tremors and shaking and seizing at one point too, from the intense alcohol withdrawals. And the hallucinations was so fucked up, I can't even explain it. But I just wanted you guys to know that, like, I've fought through that shit, and it was incredibly hard and scary. And once I checked out of there and got back home, I really realized that this wasn't a partying lifestyle that I was living. This was like a survival. Like, my body was thinking it needed alcohol to function, and to the point of which I could have died from withdrawals. I realized that I couldn't just stop. I'm an addict. Like, it's in the core of who I am. And so I realized that I needed to transfer that addiction into something else if I wanted this to stick long term. And so after that hospital trip, I ended up stringing together like 2 months of sobriety. I threw myself into skateboarding. When I started skateboarding, I actually had to find my equilibrium because I had been so fucked up on alcohol for so long that my balance was out of whack. I sucked at skateboarding. And so I got a job at a skate shop, and I started just going out with these other dudes who skateboarding was their thing. They filmed. We would skate for 12 hours a day and film tricks in the street, trying to make a video together. And that was very powerful for me. It gave me something to show up for. It gave me something to put all of that addictive energy into. I felt so alive that I could do something so intense and try hundreds of times at a trick and finally land it. The feeling and the dopamine from that was unreal. But around the 60-day mark of sobriety, my body pulled the rug out from under me. I switch ollied a 9 stair and remember this feeling way too well. I landed like kind of stiff-legged and my back just like completely blew out. And the pain was excruciating. I remember I could barely get into my buddy's car for him to drive me home. And so with that injury, I could not skate. The doctors told me I couldn't. I was just going to keep making it worse. And at that time, I also had picked up a second job. That was at a restaurant. And I remember I was in the cooler at this job. And one of my jobs as the busser was to like take these huge bins of margarita mix and mix them up and bring them out to the bartenders. And that, I think, was the time I lost my sobriety. I think I took a drink out of it or something. And from there, it spiraled pretty quickly. I was using ketamine again for the pain. It was pretty gnarly, so I was dissociating through sniffing K. Booze, coke, maybe even some DMT in there. I was smoking for probably 5 or 6 days nonstop. And what made me get back on track during that 5 or 6 days was one of my buddies I was partying with was blacked out in the middle of the day and stole a school bus in town here and drove it down the street and parked it in front of our house. And he left it running and blocking the street and went inside and passed out. And I was like, fuck, dude, I'm gonna end up like that if I don't get my shit back together again. And so I did. My parents pushed me into getting physical therapy for my back so I could actually build up core strength around it and actually properly heal. I went back into skateboarding anyways, even though it was not healthy. I was just like rolling around, getting out there with my friends in the streets. These people did not party, so it was the people I needed to be around. And so even just riding around in the car with them all day while they filmed was very good for me. And so I was in AA again for 60 days. I ended up leaving, but let me be clear, I would not ever have gotten 60 days sober both times without AA, honestly. I'm not a religious person, and it worked for me. That, like, the structure, the people, the accountability, it worked. But at that time when I left, skateboarding was everything. I was getting really good again, and I was becoming super obsessed with filming video parts. Video parts are very challenging, and they take 1 or 2 years sometimes to piece together all the different tricks. And so it was like a project for me that I could throw myself into. And I was realizing that I'm not going to be able to make this addiction and this addictive energy inside of me just like disappear. A lot of people think that you can go to therapy or go to an expensive treatment center and they just like therapy the fucking addict out of you, and it's not true whatsoever. And I think that's why a lot of times those programs don't work. Being an addict is human. It's in your core, and those dopamine receptors are always going to be there. You need to learn how to rewire them to, instead of go for a substance that could kill you, into something more positive. And for me, that was skateboarding, and nothing was more powerful than that. And while I was meeting tons of people in the Boulder and Denver skate community, I made it a goal of mine to get sponsored by Vans. I enrolled in CU Boulder and knew it was really, really high stakes. Again, my parents agreed to pay for it, and it was kind of an accountability thing for me. And I went back to school for advertising and art direction. So when I wasn't in school or at work, I was skateboarding nonstop, all hours of the day, filming. But yeah, about at that 2-year mark of pouring everything into filming these video parts, and I ended up being sponsored by Vans for 5, almost 6 years. And so as I got into like my senior year of college, I needed to focus more on my career, and I was falling in love with design, and I was still skating a lot, but I was focusing probably just as much now on my portfolio and learning and just becoming a really good designer and meeting people in that community too. And as I graduated, the obsession with skateboarding slowly started to shift, because once an addict, always an addict, into work and careers. I think after 2 years of working for someone else, I, being stubborn, said, fuck this, I'm going to do it myself, and started my own branding studio and became extremely obsessive over building businesses. So I think it's important to talk about, like, people who want to get sober, you need to change your environment. I'm not going to be able to stop getting fucked up if everyone around me is doing it, and I'm addicted to getting fucked up. And what comes with that, and it's an unfortunate reality, is you need to isolate yourself from people, like people that could negatively influence you. So if you have supportive people in your life that don't drink and don't use drugs, that you can go hang out with while you're trying to get sober, that's amazing. But for me, I'd been partying since well before I hit puberty, so I did not know anything or anyone that didn't get fucked up. So I went into isolation mode and changed my surrounding. And so many people are so afraid to get sober because they fear they won't have friends. But let me tell you something that happened when I stopped drinking. The people I thought, this 35 plus people in Vail that I thought were my best buddies, after I stopped partying, there's maybe 2 of those people that are my very, very good friends that I still talk to frequently. The rest of them I haven't heard from since, literally since. And sadly, 5 or so of these people that I would hang out with died in like the years after I had left Vail. They overdosed on drugs or unfortunately committed suicide. Even one of my old roommates. So let's get into some of the benefits of getting sober, becoming someone that people can actually count on. From 17 or 18 to 22, I was sober for like 4 or 7 days total. And what that means is I was not there for anyone. Family couldn't rely on me for jack shit. They couldn't even get a hold of me most of the time. My grandparents flew out to visit me. I don't even remember seeing them or going out to dinner or any of that shit. And nowadays, the thing I'm most proud of isn't a business or a brand. It's when I say I'm going to do something, I do it no matter what. When I tell my kids I'm going to be there for them, I'm there for them, and there's no question. When I promise my team something or a friend something, I follow through no matter how hard it might be. And that's quite the upgrade from a guy who used to blow coke in the bathroom at work every day. And second, one of the hardest things about getting sober was having to relearn emotional intelligence. Basically, when I got sober and for several years after, still to this day actually, I feel not emotionally regulated or mature necessarily, because I drank heavily through all of puberty and all of my adolescent years when that critical brain development time was very important. I didn't know how to feel things fully, whether they were good or bad. Fired, I'd get drunk. Breakup, 25 shots. court date for Drunk and Disorderly, drank an entire pint of 100 proof vodka before it. I was literally drunk in the courtroom for my drunk in public court case. So when you took that away, I was sober at 22 with the emotional intelligence of like a 12-year-old, maybe even less. I had to relearn social skills, how to talk to people without feeling awkward, how to interact in a social setting without feeling awkward, how to sit with anxiety, how to be around people without a drink in my hand. And that's what no one really talks about, is once you go through those difficult moments and growth periods, living in the moment became one of the best parts about quitting. I get nervous before talks, but I do it anyways. I used to show up to court drunk, and now I speak at universities and the nerves are so intense I almost throw up, but I do it anyways because that's the only way to grow. That 15-year-old kid in my head gets a little bit older every time I face that fear. Now, one of the biggest things that addicts don't really realize is you can turn your addiction into a literal superpower. Addicts know how to obsess. That is for damn sure. There's not many more people who can creatively think about how to get what they want at all costs than an addict. And so if you can take that energy and pour it into something like entrepreneurship and building businesses, you are fucking unstoppable. You just need to channel that addiction into the right thing. Skateboarding saved my life. Skateboarding was that for me. I owe everything to it. Fall 250 times trying a trick, land it once right away. That's a good day. Don't land it, go back tomorrow, try another 200 times. And look at that segue. Building businesses is the same way. It's incredibly hard. You're going to eat shit daily, multiple times per day, but you have to keep going. And only the people that stick with it and don't give up are the ones that end up being successful. If you look at every successful entrepreneur in history, that's the story. So I don't wish my addict brain away. I just know how important it is to focus on positive outcome oriented things, and that's how I've gotten 12 years of sobriety now. But I can sit here and preach about the benefits of sobriety all day long, but if you are not ready in every core of your being, none of this stuff is going to work. And so it's all about you. No one can make you get sober. You have to accept that you're an addict and stop trying to hide from it. I've done fucking insane shit, and I don't regret any of that because it's made me who I am today. It's given me the experiences that I needed to be able to get sober. So I want to inspire you to really let go of the shame that's keeping you addicted and really get better for yourself. I was as bad as you can get, and I was able to unfuck my mind enough to actually make sobriety stick. So I believe anyone in any circumstance can do the same. So whether you decide to quit today or in 10 years, I'm fucking here for you. But you got to take that first step and commit. If you want to talk about addiction without any fear or judgment, you can always reach out to me, drop a comment below, and we'll get in touch with each other. And I'm building Romp, which is a outdoor focused community for recovering addicts. So that is coming, and it takes what worked for me and builds an entire app around it. So if you want to learn about that, drop a comment below too.